This is the Alembic Files. I'm Al.
I'm Theo.
And we decided to do something on false flag operations. Things I guess you could consider that the government creates to create a situation. I guess that they would wish to have the population agree with. And so usually the best way, especially when it comes to wars, is to get people all pissed off. Find a boogeyman, and you're in pretty good shape. Now, we just outlined a few. I think everybody will get the general gist of the situation, but we looked at some of the incidents, and they are as follows. Fort Sumter, the sinking of the USS Maine, the sinking of the Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, the Gulf of Tonkin, and Oklahoma City regarding the Murrah building bombing, the WTC bombing, 9/11, and I hope it isn't the case, but what has just taken place in Boston, in the detonation surrounding or during the Boston Marathon. I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to put on that list, Theo?
Well, just a couple from antiquity, and this just shows you how old this trick is and how gullible populations always are. But, of course, Nero, the best resources we have anyway, say that he or somebody from his side set the city of Rome on fire, and, of course, they blamed it on the Christians because they wanted to persecute the Christians. But also, before that, I was reading online this week that I didn't know this until recently, but when Julius Caesar decided to, cross the Rubicon and come take over Rome, before he got there, he apparently sent some of his agents in to cause a few, what we would call today, terrorist attacks, in order to convince enough Roman citizens that there was no law and order in Rome, and so who's going to come and save the day? The man on the white horse, Julius Caesar. And it worked for him. It worked at the time for Nero, and it's working for governments today when they want to start a war, for the profit of a few always, or when they want to pass some lockdown legislation, get the pretext going. More than a pretext, they're proactive in helping these things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just mentioned the ones that pertain to the United States, and of course the one that became a very, popular event and back in 9/11 was referring back to the Reichstag being burnt.
Oh,
so everybody's kind of aware of that. So, yeah, the fact that you point that out, that it's happened across millennia, should be a clue, and yet it works every time. With regard to Fort Sumter, we all understand that pretty much, although some people will nitpick and say it wasn't the real triggering element in the Civil War, which I think it was. But no matter what, there was going to be a Civil War. And I'm going to ask you for your input on that right now, because as far as I'm concerned, this thing was bound to happen. They were just looking for a way to do it. So what do you think?
Oh, definitely. The old world European powers wanted it to come off. They were doing their best to get both sides fomented into a war. It worked.
And I don't think there was ever really going to be a Confederate and the United States of America. I don't think it was ever in the cards for the nation to be split, because what the nation did in the 20th century could not be done if it were split. So that was not a possibility, although it was always raised that it was going to be that. Of course, that's why there was secession. And yet, in a sense, that flew in the face of the Constitution, which doesn't mean a thing anyway, but you were allowed to secede, but you'll go ahead and try it. And that's what we've gotten. But this goes back even into the 50s, in the 1850s. And might have been one of the reasons why Buchanan was poisoned at his inaugural party.
Which virtually nobody knows about.
No, and I tell you, I've gone back and taken a look at some of the accounts, and they are a riot. One of them claims he had malaria.
Okay. Well, what about the dozens of people that were killed? by the same thing he ingested.
Well, first of all, they're saying there was nothing ingested. So that was in some newspapers. Another one said definitely that I forget what it was that they said that he ate. Something was spoiled. I mean, you get the cherries in the milk thing. I don't know. And then there's accounts, that just vary. And when I went back and I took a look, I bookmarked where I found them in this Chronicling America .loc. And it's great to read these accounts. I mean, because that's just, first reporting, and it's there to be seen. But there seems to be a lot of dancing around the fact that there was an assassination attempt on him. And certainly, even though he did survive and others did die, as you noted, and this happened in D.C., I think it was the National Hotel or something like that. I just like how selective malaria gets, So.
Yeah, and it only affects the one side. Yeah, it's selective, all right.
So at any rate, he was never the same after that. He was about as malleable as he could be, but I don't think he wanted any part of beginning the Civil War. So it devolved upon whoever was going to be next, and that's Lincoln. And we're not giving Lincoln a pass as being a hero or the fabled character that we see right up there against with Washington. They're both myths. But I must say I think that Lincoln was somebody who knew what the deal was going to be. He knew what he had to execute. He did it. And I do think that he didn't have the stomach for it. And at some point, probably around Gettysburg, he changed his mind. And that was not good news for all the other interested parties, both in his political party and elsewhere. But on the other hand, we see people who are constantly killing Lincoln and executing him and bringing him back out. And I'm like, all right, enough is enough. We got it. All right. He's not a demigod. But he's not the bastard you say he is either. He's somewhere in the middle. He became a president. What do you expect? And you've seen the same thing all along with these the two sides, one that want to glorify and one that want to demonize him. Isn't that been your experience as well, Theo?
Yeah, and it's sadly I've talked to a couple of people in the South today over the years, and they would see my point, see what I'm looking at about a lot of historical things. But, when it came to explaining, for example, they'd be the patriot types, and they would even understand most of the problem with the 14th Amendment. However, when I would try to explain to them the influence of Rome and the historical documents there, they won't even look at that. Oh, and then because I would link, of course, factually, historically, I'm trying to show them the documents which prove that Lincoln was assassinated by Rome, ultimately. And they won't even look at that because to them, they chalk it up to just Charles Chinnicky, which it's a good source, but there are many others. And because they fear that that's going to make Lincoln look like a good guy, like a martyr. Well, I don't care about that. I was just trying to show them, factually who assassinated him.
Yeah, and of course this goes on and on and on. You still have the one side in the history book side that make him look like I said, a demigod, and then there are the others that can't kill him enough, and it goes on and on and on. Look, he was a president. That means you're a son of a bitch to begin with. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is.
I do think he had some kind of change of heart at Gettysburg. I mean, can you imagine walking through that carnage and seeing it? Who knows how that might affect somebody.
Yeah, I think when they talk about all the similarities between Lincoln and Kennedy, one I think you can add to that as well is that the both of them knew what the deal was when they signed on for this, and I think that both changed their minds, ironically, 100 years apart. Lincoln in 1863, Kennedy, before, obviously November 1963, but at some point in time, I just think they decided they couldn't do it this way, and the one sure sign when the president is assassinated is that they probably changed the script, and that's not a good thing to do. And that's when they sent out the lone gunman. But with regard to Fort Sumter, I mean, first of all, the Confederate States had ceded. They'd become their own government, and here we have a Union installation in the South, and that's Fort Sumter in the Bay of Charleston, South Carolina. So, I mean, first of all, you would think that the Union troops would get their butt out of there and they would be allowed to go peaceably and safely. But no, that stayed down there. So what happened was there was an order for the fort to be restocked with supplies, not anything necessarily of a military nature or an aggressive nature. And let me just read one paragraph from one of the many summaries about what took place that day. It talks about the Vice President of the Confederacy, Stevens, saying that he identified the beginning of the war as Lincoln's order sending a, quote, hostile fleet styled the Relief Squadron to reinforce Fort Sumter. The war was then and there inaugurated and began by the authorities at Washington. General Beauregard did not open fire upon Fort Sumter until this fleet was, to his knowledge, very near the harbor of Charleston, and until he had inquired of Major Anderson whether he would engage to take no part in the expected blow then coming down upon him from the approaching fleet. When Major Anderson would not make such a promise, it became necessary for General Beauregard to strike the first blow as he did, otherwise the forces under his command might have been exposed to two fires at the same time, and in front and another in the rear. The use of force by the Confederacy, therefore, was, in self-defense, rendered necessary by the actions of the other side. So by sending the ship down there, it was clear what was going to happen. And it happened, and there you had your Civil War.
And the sources you and I know about, they cite that Beauregard was a Romanist. It's worth noting.
Oh, that whole thing is so strange. I mean, you got Jefferson Davis, who was in contact with Rome. Heretofore he had summered up in Canada. I mean, it's not like these people would necessarily just dead bang, diehard Southerners. And the same goes for John Wilkes Booth. I mean, they got him as this crazed madman who couldn't take the fact that the Confederacy had been dashed. But this guy was an actor who was up in New York more than most people were. Even during the war, he was going up there. I mean, he was availing himself of a certain woman who was also seeing a Union general at the same time. I mean, it's like laughable to a certain extent, This wasn't all, about all ramped up Southerners who, couldn't take the fact that the Confederacy wasn't going to stand. But at any rate, and I mean that's one of the reasons why it's crazy to think that Booth shot Lincoln for any kind of military advantage. There was none. It was over with. That was a hit. And this goes back to what we were saying about Rome. But that was a whack job that had nothing to do with the war. It had to do with payback, if you will.
And banking.
Yeah, and also because people were making money on the war, and now the war was ending, in their estimation, too soon. And they had to go with all and there were people in Lincoln's own party that were profiteering. Even in his close circles. So, I mean, there was a lot of intrigue in that, but again, when we were put back together again, it was in a different manner that has stayed with us to this day.
Well, sure. 2 years after that war, you had the coup d'etat called the Reconstruction Acts by those same people in Lincoln's party. But not that they were at the head of it, but they were prominent.
And, one last comment, if we will. I often wonder, too, if Lincoln's haste to end the war, if it were somewhat humanitarian, it might have also kind of compelled Sheridan to go on what is now the infamous March to the Sea. And Sherman, I'm sorry, Sheridan, I said, right? Sherman.
Yeah.
And that's something that really stuck with a lot of people down here is that absolute, just annihilation of everything and everyone. And it may have hastened the end of the war, but, it's to be humanitarian, you have to be what? Anti-humanitarian? So that's that. It may not have ended that way had Lincoln maybe not had the change of heart. I don't know. Now, the next incident is the sinking of the USS Maine. We are led to believe that there was a mine out there in the harbor in Havana, and that put there by the Spanish, and that blew up the Maine. And, of course, everybody got all PO'd in the United States, and then they want to go around and smack some Spanish butt. What's your take on this?
Oh yeah, total inside job. We wanted the Spanish possessions. We wanted, and it was not even just Cuba. That we wanted the Philippines is what we really wanted. We got them.
Yeah, we've been all through that. How in the world you didn't take Cuba? But that's right. That's because you wanted to allow Cuba to remain independent.
Yeah.
You know, which of course is the burr in our bonnet to this very day. But it's supposed to be that way, and that's what set up that kind of situation. And it's just kind of crazy to think that Americans and Cubans go to work at Guantanamo Bay all the time, punch clocks, go in and go out, and here we're supposed to be at such odds with the Cuban government that there is no kind of reciprocity or any kind of commerce. And this is interesting. The former mayor of Tampa gave a speech at St. Leo University, and I had to tape it. And I was surprised during the Q&A that followed that Greco admitted that there was business going on between the United States and Cuba below the radar screen. I was really surprised he said that publicly. And I think at that time he was specifically referencing that corn was being sent down. I mean, the farmers were doing business with Cuba. And I mean, I don't really care. But I mean, and that's what this whole speech was about, was normalizing trade with Cuba. Why not? I mean, go ahead. But
I have a quote here you're going to get a kick out of. It's by McKinley, William McKinley, the president at that time. So that war happened in 1898. It was fomented, of course, by the so-called yellow press, the Hearst publications, and everybody today we're willing to admit that Hearst's publications were propaganda, and they fomented that war. But we can't make the connections, connect the dots, and see that the same thing's happening today. It's just different people in charge of the press. But okay, so 1898 was the war. In 1899, okay, the source on this is a book called The Life of William McKinley. But in 1899, apparently, William McKinley made some speech before a Methodist Episcopal church, and here's what he wrote. Now, keep in mind, we had the United States forces during the invasion and occupation of the Philippines. We had killed an estimated 200,000 Filipino civilians, all right? But here's what McKinley said. This is going to sound like Bush Jr. He said, "We could not leave them to themselves. They were unfit for self-government, and they would soon have anarchy and misrule over there, worse than Spain's was. There was nothing left for us to do but to take them all and to educate the Filipinos and uplift and civilize and Christianize them." That's great. We're going to Christian. That's like the in Vietnam, we had to save the village. We had to destroy the village by saving it.
Oh, yeah. It goes back to the native peoples, too. We're going to save you by killing you if you don't like what we tell you to do. And just real quickly, I haven't really spent a lot of time. I'd like to, I think, but I don't know if I'll ever get to it, because I don't believe that the assassinations of Garfield and McKinley were lone gunmen. I mean, I know Guiteau was involved in Sholgosh and all this other stuff, but there's more to it than that. But
I like to throw in the Huey Long one too.
Yep.
It fits the pattern. The lone nut gunmen, when of course there were money powers behind it.
Well, you have no Secret Service at the time of Lincoln's assassination, and supposedly his guard walks away, and then Booth makes his move. But now that happened in 1865. And what we have 16 years later, Garfield is walking through Union Station, and really with not much protection, two people in his entourage, not necessarily very fond of Garfield. It's the old Julius Caesar story. You've got enemies in your midst.
Yeah.
And they walk him through Union Station, and bang, he gets popped. Now, that still isn't enough. You have McKinley getting popped in 1901, right? This is 20 years after, 20 years after Garfield's. And, I mean, doesn't anybody get it? There was Secret Service at the time, and I found in one of these old newspapers in that website I mentioned that where it was openly questioned, like, how did you guys not jump this guy? I mean, he's in this line waiting to shake McKinley's hand. He's got a handkerchief wrapped around his hand. Don't you think it'd be like, oh, come over here, let's take a look at that. Oh no, he goes right up and pops McKinley. You think? I mean, come on, man. What are the odds for a lone gunman to be successful 3 out of 3 times in the course of what? That would be some like 45 years or so. 46.
Only in the U.S.
So anyway, here we go with the Maine. Now, I'll just read what they did and then kind of put a postscript on this. So the U.S. Navy Department immediately formed a board of inquiry to determine the reason for the Maine's destruction. The inquiry conducted in Havana lasted 4 weeks. The condition of the submerged wreck and the lack of technical expertise prevented the board from being as thorough as later investigations. And in the end, they concluded that a mine had detonated under the ship. The board did not attempt to fix blame for the placement of the device, the Maine. All right, then, the destruction of the Maine did not cause the U.S. to declare war on Spain, but it served as a catalyst, accelerating the approach to a diplomatic impasse. In addition, the sinking and deaths of U.S. sailors rallied American opinion more strongly behind armed intervention. Well, isn't that kind of like starting the war? I mean, this semantic crap. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Lastly, in 1911, the Navy Department ordered a second board of inquiry after Congress voted funds for the removal of the wreck of Maine from Havana Harbor. U.S. Army engineers built a cofferdam around the sunken battleship, thus exposing it and giving naval investigators an opportunity to examine and photograph the wreckage in detail. Finding the bottom hull plates in the area of the reserve 6-inch magazine bent inward and back, the 1911 board concluded that a mine had detonated under the magazine, causing the explosion that destroyed the ship. But it gets better. Technical experts at the time of both investigations disagree with the findings, believing that spontaneous combustion of coal in the bunker adjacent to the reserve 6-inch magazine was the most likely cause of the explosion on board the ship. In 1976, Admiral Hyman G. Rickover published his book, How the Battleship Maine Was Destroyed. The admiral became interested in the disaster and wondered if application of modern scientific knowledge could determine the cause. He called on 2 experts on explosions and their effects on ship hulls. Using documentation gathered from the 2 official inquiries, as well as information on the construction and ammunition of Maine, the experts concluded that the damage caused to the ship was inconsistent with the external explosion of a mine. The most likely cause, they speculated, was spontaneous combustion of coal in the bunker next to the magazine. Now, the question was whether or not there was sabotage. But in foreshadowing what took place in 9/11 at the World Trade Towers, the hull that was in question was removed by the Army and kind of like disappeared.
Oh, gee. What a coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, the smoking gun gets carried away. And I'll tell you where that came from. That came from a documentary on the History Channel that I saw, and I had a laugh because they could even today have concluded positively what the cause was, and they just can't find the piece. Maybe it's in Staten Island with all the stuff from the 9/11 towers. So there you have it.
Yeah, they did. They did the same exact thing at the several sites of on 9/11, didn't they?
Yeah.
Removing the evidence hurriedly.
Yep.
And Oklahoma City bombing too, I believe.
Yeah.
But we'll get to those.
Yep. All right, so there you have it. USS Maine. Now, the Lusitania is sunk on May 7, 1915. And, of course, we were brought up in the United States to believe that Germany was really bad guys and how dare you sink a passenger ship, you really suck, and let's go to war. How else would you going to get basically isolationist Americans to want to get involved in something like that? And that did not hurt, let's just put it that way. Although, if you think about it, I mean, how many normal, like regular hoi polloi people were on the Lusitania? I think you had a little bit of coin to get on that boat, you know what I mean? But still...
like the Titanic. Yeah, you had to be rich.
Yeah. Oh, there's another one for you, too. Theo, you had sent an email about asking folks what's the big deal with... Well, I call it the Ides of April.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it takes place between the 14th and the 19th, whatever it is, all right?
Some high holy day in ancient paganism, isn't it?
I guess. I mean, what is it? But I mean, Earth Day, as the cooker explained, was also during that time. So, I mean, you got your little pagan ties to it, but still in all, it's the birthday to Hitler on the 18th. You got the Patriot thing happening, going back to Bunker Hill, blah, blah, blah. And then there's Columbine happened, and OKC happened during that time, and it's tax day and all this other stuff. So, and by the way, the Titanic sunk during that week also. That's why I bring it up. I don't know. But here we have a sacrifice of citizens, innocents, to foment war. And there's a book which I think is excellent, written by Colin Simpson, titled very simply The Lusitania. And he has documentation. He's included images of letters and of, I guess, bill of ladings and everything. I mean, he's done his homework. And there is no doubt at all that the United States and Britain were engaging in using passengers as shields for the transportation of munitions, stores, other elements of aid that the United States was giving Britain in her battle with Germany. Now, we're supposed to think that the Germans just downed the Lusitania, that it had no military advantage, but it did. And everybody knew it for the most part. And I've said it before, mentioning it, and it comes from this book as well, that the Germans wanted a warning circulated in about 50 newspapers in the United States.
Yeah, they paid for it.
Yeah, they paid for it, but I think one or two papers did it, and no one else did.
The Des Moines Register was the only one that printed their warning.
Oh, the Des Moines Register, yes.
And, man, there was some powerful string puller or pullers that told, is another example of the startling control of the U.S. press, but told all those papers on the Eastern Seaboard, don't run that warning advertisement that Germany had paid money for.
Yeah, and Wilson also got the warning and somehow didn't release it to the public. And as much as I think that he was the person that was supposed to be in office to allow the creation of the Federal Reserve and also World War I. Remember, he ran on the plank, what was it, we'll keep your boys out of war. Yeah, okay.
Don't they always?
Yeah, absolutely. But you get a feeling at least that there was some infighting going on, if there in fact really was, but that Wilson was torn between two factions. Actually, it was a faction of one. His current Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan, who was trying to impress upon Wilson the need to, not get into war. Let's settle this thing. We can do it. And he tried, but of course he failed. Those who did win was this nexus that comprised Robert Lansing, who happens to be the uncle of the Dulles brothers. So, it's all in the family. He and Joseph Tumulty, who's a figure that kind of like gets forgotten about because of the third member of this triad, and that was Colonel Mandel House. Those three supposedly were in Wilson's ear to let's go to war and kick some booty. And Bryan resigned over what took place or didn't take place with the president with regard to the Lusitania, and the person who got his job is the one who wanted it, and that was Lansing. So, and off we went into war. Now, again, if you can get a chance to read this book, it's very, very compelling. I'm just going to hit you with a couple of paragraphs, if you will indulge me, Theo.
Yeah, that's a great book.
It says, let's see. All right, they talk about there would have been an eventual meeting between the U-boat that was out in that channel behind Ireland, and of course, which would lead to the west side of the UK and Liverpool, where it was headed. And I'll just pick it up there. It said U-20 is the submarine involved. It said if the U-20 remained stationary, the two, meaning that submarine and the Lusitania, they would meet at dawn the following morning with the Juno in the area close by. The Juno was being sent out as protection to bring the Lusitania all the way home. if the if the U-20 turned west, then the rendezvous would be even sooner, because if you can imagine, well, if you can visualize this, the U-boat, the U-20, was kind of southeast of the southeast corner of Ireland. And so if it went west, it would be moving toward the Lusitania, who's making its way northeast up to Liverpool. It said, Admiral Oliver drew to Churchill's attention the fact that the Juno was unsuitable for exposure to submarine attack without escort, and suggested that elements of the destroyer flotilla from Milford Haven should be sent forthwith to her assistance. All right, it says, at this juncture, the Admiralty War Diary stops short, perhaps understandably, as it was here the decision was made that was to be the direct cause of the disaster. No one alive today knows who made it, but Churchill and Fisher, both of them were in the higher-ups in the Navy, must share the responsibility. Shortly after noon on May 5th, the Admiralty signaled the Juno to abandon her escort mission and return to Queenstown. She was to travel southeast overnight so as to clear the Fastnet by some 50 miles in under cover of darkness. The Lusitania was not informed that she was now alone and closing every minute to the U-20. Admiral Coke at Queenstown was informed of the order and instructed to protect the Lusitania as best he could. Coke, in turn, did not warn the Lusitania. They sent those people to their deaths, and they had ample opportunity to forestall any kind of incident. Even if the Lusitania had taken a shot and the Juno were there, or anybody was there, whether it was this fleet out of Milford Haven, there would have been the loss of life. And where we're going to is that the one torpedo, there were not two torpedoes fired by the sub. There was one. That would not have sunk the Lusitania. It was the second explosion and the damage it did that sunk the Lusitania like a rock.
Cutting off the communication and not telling the people that needed to know that they're going to repeat that pattern when we get to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I mean, they were just sent out and hung out to dry.
Yeah.
And what's even more heartbreaking to consider, excuse me, that these people were in sight of land, at least to their west and possibly to their east. I mean, there was land about, and they were never going to reach the shores alive. Okay, now here we go with the cover-up real quick. The State Department cleared their archive for public inspection in 1965, but of the copies sent to the Board of Trade, though at the time of the 1950 inquiry they would have been invaluable in determining many of the mysteries surrounding Lusitania, no trace remains except the acknowledgement to Mr. Frost of their safe receipt. The Board of Trade took depositions on oath from every one of the 289 members of the crew who survived. Only 13 of these are available at the Public Record Office, and they all possess a curious lack of originality. Without exception, even though signed with a mark by a literate seaman, they place the torpedo's impact as well aft, amidship, or both. I won't go on any more about that, but here's the point. Survivors did reach both coasts. The first ones reached alive to Ireland's coast, and State Department people took down the affidavits, their testimonies, their eyewitness accounts of what happened. All of them got lost. The British Board of Trade did the same thing with those that were going to contradict what England's take would be on it. And so they get these 280-some-odd seamen to basically sign a boilerplate affidavit about, and it was critical as to where the torpedo hit. But they got lost.
That's amazing. Just lost, huh?
Yeah, except for the seamen's affidavits, which were cooked and as it was stated, lacking in originality. So it was like, sign here, this is what you saw, go away. Now what happened was, and I'll let this be the end of it, you got to read this thing. But
what's the name of the book again?
The Lusitania by Colin Simpson was written in 1972. Now, there's a problem now for America because, in fact, they were sending passengers over as shields. And that Germany did everything it could to dissuade them from doing that, and they were in their element. They were, if you want to call it in the rules of engagement, they were definitely supported in their stance. What they did was allowed. We talked about that before.
We were using human shields.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Germany tried to say, look, don't do this. And they did it because Germany didn't want war with the United States. So they did everything they could to try to appease America. But, I mean, if you're not going to listen, what else can you do? But the whole controversy around the Lusitania was that the Germans shot 2 torpedoes, and they did not. And they proved they didn't. They shot one, and then there was a second explosion, which either was set or was a result of the first torpedo. But had those munitions not been there, the Lusitania would not have sunk. And so what happens is they run this by government legal to see where they're at as far as their status and how they should proceed, because they were stuck in a sense between Britain and Germany. Both countries were equally in favorable status with the United States. So here's what the government legal came back with. This is beautiful. 6 quick points. Britain had obliterated the distinction between merchantmen and men of war. Therefore, Germany had every right to sink the Lusitania. If Germany had not sunk the Lusitania, then a valuable cargo of munitions would have passed through to Germany's enemies. There was no basis in international law for the United States' claim that the life of an American citizen was sacrosanct, even when aboard a belligerent ship of any category. That England had recognized this fact during the Russo-Japanese War and had published a warning to her citizens against taking passage in belligerent vessels. And lastly, that the owners and operators of the Lusitania appeared to have committed a breach of Section 5 of the Passenger Act of the navigational laws of the United States. So here Britain had turned around and done the same thing that Germany did in a sense, but this time ignored it because it suited their purposes to get the United States eventually fully fledged in a war, although they did not come in for another, 2 years plus. But, if one of the visuals that would have to grab you is that one guy in a life jacket just jumped off of the sinking Lusitania and was kind of exhausted and in shock and everything else, but recalls floating on his back amongst several what they call Moses baskets, in which there were babies from the nursery who had returned for a nap after their lunch. And he said he laid among them and listened to the cries, several of them, until finally they were all stilled. They were drowned in their Moses baskets.
Oh man!
Now how can you stomach that? God Almighty.
So it's Britain that was wrong, not Germany.
No, and America was too. The United States was just as complicit. So there you have it. Anything to start a war. Yeah. Now we go to Pearl, which I guess most people are more familiar with. But I'm going to throw it to you because now you have in your possession, as you said a couple of shows back, you do have the Final Secret of Pearl Harbor. Is that correct?
Yeah, by Rear Admiral Robert Theobald. Yeah.
Do you want to sum up what you got from that, please?
Fantastic book. That was written in the mid-50s by a military admiral who was there. He was present for Pearl Harbor. In what capacity, I forget, but he was there, and he writes that Admiral Kimmel was a scapegoat, and also General Short with the Army. Both those guys, they were the scapegoated, and the tone in his book, he's very angry. He knows he's right. He knows the men who died at Pearl Harbor were set up to die because FDR and his cabinet wanted a war with Japan, and that includes General Marshall. He was in on it too. And Theobald proves that the United States, that FDR and his cabinet anyway, had years before, I think, if months or years before, they had thoroughly broken the Japanese secret code and were reading all of their messages, and they knew that Japan was going to attack, and there was a certain machine by which they could read the codes of Japan, and was it the purple machine? I forget what it was called, but they gave these machines out to all of their outposts all along the Pacific, and Guam had one, the Philippines had one, even the Dutch. They gave one to the Dutch in wherever in Micronesia the Dutch were. But the one place they didn't give this code intercepting machine was Hawaii, and they didn't and also the Japanese. I can't remember if Theobald gets into this or two later authors who wrote about this do, certainly, but also the Japanese did not. They failed to maintain radio silence en route to Hawaii, and so we knew they were coming, and we let them attack. We wanted it. We needed a pretext to get into that war, because even though it was secondary, we wanted war with Germany first of all, to again help out our master and controller, Mother Britain.
Yeah, that was it, because there was the tripartite agreement, whereupon if Germany, Italy, or Japan were attacked, an attack on one was an attack on all. So with the war declared on Japan, the government got its war with Germany, which, again, the American people were kind of not interested in getting involved. I mean, the pulse of the American people prior to World War I and II, both times were like, don't get us involved. That's like a European thing. And although you could say, well, look at all the devastation and the destruction and the loss of life, everybody understands that. But that doesn't mean you have to go over and jump in. But I'm sure that there are, millions of French and Polish and Dutch and other nationalities were very happy to see the Americans there. There's no doubt about it. But still in all, we were not inclined to get involved. So
that's what Europe does. Going back millennia, they fight. Let them fight. That's why we got out of there.
All right. Now, I got this book, which I bought and donated to St. Leo Library, titled Day of Deceit, The Truth About FDR and Pearl Harbor.
That's another great book.
And that was written by Robert Stinnett, who served in the United States Navy from 42 to 46 out in the Pacific. And then he was able to obtain a number of documents heretofore confidential through FOIA. But one of the things that's really interesting is this. This is great. All right. This is a dispatch from Tokyo. The asset's name is Matsuoka, to Berlin, to Oshima. This is May 5, 1941. And in parentheses, and you'll understand it says purple-CA. So there's your purple machine.
There we go.
All right, and it says, now get this, all right, so this is between Japanese assets, one in Tokyo, one in Berlin. Please express our appreciation to, and this is an acronym, STAMA, S-T-A-A-M-A-A, to STAMA for the information in question, and ask him if it is not possible to give us the authority for the statement that it has been fairly reliably established that the U.S. government is reading our code messages so that we might take appropriate action. All right, so now in May of 1941, the Japanese knew their code had been broken. And just another...
They even knew.
Huh?
They even knew.
I guess when certain things are stopped that you don't think anybody knows you were trying to perpetrate, after a while it's like, does somebody have foreknowledge of this? And just real quickly, it says, Japanese admirals, believing that their naval codes were secure, filled the intelligence pipeline with messages that made clear their intentions during the weeks preceding Pearl Harbor. 4 of these disclosures were radio messages originated between November 5 and December 2, 1941, by Admiral Osami Nagano, Chief of the Naval General Staff. And it goes on, blah, blah, blah. And they kept pumping stuff out in preparation for the oncoming war.
What I like about Stinnett's book, he adds one more thing because it's written at a later date, and he did go get those Freedom of Information Acts.
Yeah.
Theobald and another guy, John Toland, they cover many of the acts of provocation that FDR and his henchmen did to provoke Germany into attacking, like the embargo on the oil and freezing their economic assets and sending the volunteer mercenaries over to China, the Flying Tiger is General Chenault and all that. But Stinnett also adds this, which I didn't know about till I read his book. FDR had, or the men around him who told him what to do. We had cruisers, like they would send a lone cruiser in deep into Japanese water to just pop up and make itself known, and then when the Japanese would send ships out to stop it, to see what's going on, and then they would the American ship would hightail it out of there. But we would do that to just provoke them, to mess with them.
Yeah, there was an instigation that caused them to attack. I mean, this is why we're doing this, because it's not unlike what was used at Fort Sumter, in a sense, if you know what I mean. You're looking for something to start a fight, so obviously you do whatever is obvious, and when when it's violated. For instance, if the Union leaves their Fort Sumter there in their possession, you got a problem. All right, so what are you asking? You're asking for it to be attacked. And once something occurs, bang, you got your war. Same thing here. Go the Japanese. All right, they're going to go to Pearl Harbor. We'll make believe we don't know. Bang, it happens. Now we got a war. The last paragraph of this particular part of the afterword in Stinnett's book, and if anybody's given to wanting to purchase this, get an edition that's 2001 or later, because it contains images and more text that was not available in the first edition, or those whatever editions were prior to 2001. Stinnett closes this one section by saying, by continuing to classify Japanese naval intercepts and their communication and decoding data as a national defense secret, the National Security Agency has done a disservice to the excellent cryptographers and the radio intelligence obtained by monitor stations operated by the U.S. and her allies in 1941, as well as to history herself. The author estimates there are at least 143,000 Japanese naval intercepts, plus supporting communication data that remain unseen in the 1941 U.S. Navy files. And finally, he says, nevertheless, the major secrets of Pearl Harbor are at last out in the open. After years of denial, the truth is clear. We knew. And they did know. And I had to laugh because there was a book that came out to kind of, I guess, to parry at least Theobald's book. And I was gifted with it by a listener. And what I had to laugh was, this is going to be the true story of Pearl Harbor. And it was written by an author who was giving full rein to just pursue every avenue by Stimson, who was one of the bastards who knew that the Japs were coming and was in FDR's cabinet.
Yeah, three of the most horrible people who knew about all this were, of course, FDR and Stimson and General Marshall.
Yeah, so, Stimson, and then saying, you see, this is what you got to love, but you see, this is why there is always a problem. This is what begats conspiracy theories, and that is the works that are beauty pieces or hit pieces, depending on what they want to do, to support the government and the history textbook stories, are always promoted. The ones that have something to say differently never get promoted. They're out there, but more or less how many people are paying attention, or even honestly, how many people know they're out there. And that was the whole idea. So they don't suppress the books necessarily, though that happens as well, but that they're just not promoted so nobody knows. So does anybody know about Theobald's book or Stinnett's book? Probably not. Does anybody know about this other book that came out that was backed by the government? Yes. And the person sent it to me saying, for obvious reasons, I'm sending you this because that's their side of the story. But how can Stimson, who was one of the perps, turn around and say this is going to be an honest account and this individual can go wherever he wants to go? Make me puke, will you please?
Then also the other henchman with inside knowledge, the General Marshall, Al, he was one of the instigators that started the war, got us into the war, and then after the war, he was put in charge of, what we now call the Marshall Plan, and you had talked to somebody that totally proved that in Europe, it's known and documented that was all about Marshall signing off on getting the U.S. taxpayer to rebuild
Europe. Yeah, that's right. That particular woman is a Christian missionary, but on this one particular situation. She accompanied her sister, who was a prof, and who was attending some kind of conference in, I believe, Austria, and she accompanied her. And so while her sister was busy with the things of the conference, she was allowed to walk around certain buildings, and she got herself into a kind of a library. And she's the one that just had said to me, she said she was amazed when she went in there. She said she found every single volume of IRS codes and laws and everything else. And as she went through stuff, she said, yeah, she had come away. She was saying, you know what? The American people paid for the Marshall Plan. In other words, our military and the Allied military destroyed the whole place, and American taxpayers paid to reconstruct it.
So Marshall gets America into that war, and then he sticks us with the bill.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Oh, it works every time. All right, look, yeah, we'll make this a part 2 situation, and I think we probably should do it with some proximity to this one, but with some distance, because we'll find out what's going on with the second suspect in this whole situation up in Boston. So, all right, listen, I appreciate it, Theo. Thanks for coming aboard, and we'll pick this up as part 2.